What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team.
What's up, dudes? Sorry, today's going to be a bumpy ride. We are live now. My Crowdcast app, Phil's going to really delight in hearing this. My Crowdcast app on my phone is just like not working. So I know Phil's a big fan of it, but today it's not coming through for us. So anyway, Ray, if you don't mind, I'd love to have you kind of lead this session. I'm on my way out to do a presentation to this company, so I'm sorry that I'm in commute. Same thing's going to be true for Friday as well. But in true form, never failing us, we have the Boston psychologist now as a co-pilot to Ray. MFG, what's up, my friend? How you doing?
In shorthand, it's the Boston Psycho.
I'm doing well, man. How are you guys?
I am good. Wes, do you want to introduce this idea of the personal brand on this Alex Hormozi video that you watched that kind of like really stimulated you earlier in this week?
Yeah. So I think we're in a time of business right now, and I would even say, like, hey, even if you're not going to own and operate your own business, just running your career, whether or not you're an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, I think is really important to simultaneously be building your personal brand. In fact, I would say it's even easier if you're going to be working for a company. As an example, I just hired Kyle, as you guys know, who's now part of the team. One of the reasons that I hired him is that, he was applying for the position. And when I actually looked at his personal brand online, it was outstanding. He had his own website, right? Like his LinkedIn profile, like he put a lot of effort into his personal brand. So this is more of a battle cry to get everybody to recognize like how important that is. And it's also easier and more economical than it's ever been.
Yeah. So there is a Alex Hormozi video that Wes sent to me earlier in the week. And we talked about it on our business podcast together, where Alex Hormozi, I guess business influencer would be the easiest way to describe him, did a kind of breakdown of the way Taylor Swift, The Rock, and Joe Rogan and Mr. Beast have been able to convert their original careers into like global superstar status by way of deftly using their personal brand and the attention economy to kind of advance their business interests. Now, Wes, what would you say to those who say, well, it's easy for Taylor Swift. She's a multi-platinum artist. It's easy for The Rock because he's a famous actor. There's no point in me doing having a professional approach to my personal brand because that's only something celebrities do.
I mean, I think if you actually reverse engineer it and say, or actually pick a different mental model. Like when we're running our business, I know how hard it is to get 30 people in a room to present to. It costs us a lot of money, about 25 grand per session, right? if anybody's ever tried to get a handful of people in a room to listen to what they say, it's really hard. But now with the internet, if you have a following of 50 people, it's almost like a failure. You know what I mean? Like the perception. So if you actually take a brick and mortar psychology to it and apply it to the digital world, can you imagine if you had 1,000 people following you around in person? I mean, you'd be the unofficial mayor in your town or city. So I think that's how profound personal branding is on the internet space. If you actually stop thinking about The Rock and Taylor Swift and so on, because it usually deters people. It's like, oh, well, I'm never going to have, 500 million followers. It's like, you don't need that much. You need, what if you're a tech guy, let's say, like Phil, and you happen to have 20 CXO level executives of Silicon Valley as part of your following or part of your network. Hard to lose that way. So anyway, I'll shut up there. Phil, what's your perspective, bro?
I always think this whenever brands come up, and I'm not trying to say so I think you're totally right that it's basically a massive opportunity cost failure to not be building a brand. I think that's a very important thing to be doing. But the thing is, I think it's also very important when you're building a personal brand or any brand with a company or personal brand to really make sure you're being honest. Okay, because this is the thing. Brands can be used very honestly or extremely dishonestly, right? And that's actually, I think, dishonestly is the primary way that, at least what I notice, is the primary way that companies use brands. They use brands to sell you in ways that they can't sell you without a brand, right? So, for example, I don't want to go on a huge rant about this, but for example, Rockstar. Rockstar is an energy drink, or sorry, not Rockstar. There's a bunch of them. They all do the same thing, but Red Bull is the most successful by far. Red Bull is an energy drink that is basically just extremely unhealthy. It's a fuck ton of sugar. It's a fuck ton of energy. You can drink it if you want to, whatever, but it'd probably be a lot healthier to just drink some kind of caffeine without all the other bullshit in it. And what Red Bull does very, very successfully is they spend an ungodly amount of money putting their name all over extreme sports. Why? Because extreme sports require you to be in extremely good health, extremely courageous, extremely precise, badass person to do those kinds of things. That has nothing to do with drinking Red Bull at all. That has nothing to do with drinking Red Bull. Drinking Red Bull will not make you like that. It won't help you like that. I really doubt any of those people drink Red Bull. And that's why Red Bull does it, is because it puts this association in your mind with drinking Red Bull and being a badass, really cool athlete guy, right? So, and I think that it's not just companies that do that. I also see there's tons and tons, that's why influencers become kind of a pejorative these days, being an online influencer, because most of them, the easiest way to be an influencer to make a lot of money is to just be an asshole and lie all the time and get really good at lying. And so I just think if you're going to be building a brand, make sure you're doing it in an honest way, right? Because it's very easy to I think just because of the culture of it, there's so many people that are sociopathic about it. It seems like they're just yeah, here's what you could do to make money. And it's they don't even care to think about, is this honest and good for the world,
That's
a fair point,
brother. Outstanding advice. People have such sophisticated, and Kaizen, I'll throw this over to you. People have such sophisticated media savvy now that they know instantly when someone's trying to sell them something. They'll know instantly when it's product placement. And so people have a authentic / inauthentic, or to use the word Phil used, honest / dishonest kind of bullshit meter right away when they look at something, right? And so what do you think about that, Kaizen?
That's the whole authenticity versus inauthenticity. That's why when brands like Pepsi tries to do a joke or a meme that other people are already doing, it comes off as gross. It's because it's like a corporation trying to do something. So the human version of that is just putting out this front of something that's not real behind the scenes, it's like obviously there's something off. That's what that like cringe feeling is.
When something's
So-
like super curated, overly curated, where you're only seeing like the most like polished version of somebody all the time, right?
Yeah, that's like what people were making fun of like Garth Brooks for. Like when people get to the certain level of just they're very aware of what they're saying and they're trying not to offend people. They're not being the real, true, genuine self.
Of course, guys of our vintage will, like you and me, Kaizen, will remember Garth Brooks's alter ego, right? Which was Tim Kaine, I think, was it?
Chris Gaines.
Chris something, right?
Chris Gaines, yeah, where he had like a flavor saver and kind of like gothy kind of bangs and stuff. MFG, you rocked that look for a little while, didn't you?
No.
No.
No, I think a lot of what Alex Hormozi talks about is less about creating some curated image or some finished brand or having all of the intent behind it. I think that it's how you present yourself is important, but I think that what you're doing is much more important than that, and actually putting the work out there. And I find that the more vulnerable you are and the more honest in your portrayal of what it is that you're trying to build, that inherently makes you multitudes more relatable. Because if you're just somebody that's doing, things that other people can't, you know what I mean? Then it's easy for people to discount themselves and be like, oh, well, that's easy for him, or that's the case. But when you're open and honest and vulnerable, it really shines a light on why what you're doing is extraordinary within the context of I'm just like you, if that makes sense. So to keep it more relatable in order to highlight what it is that you actually do have to offer.
Yeah. Wes, what do you think about that? That's a really like obvious, as usual, like really profound contribution by MFG. Like, are we like when you and I talk about a personal brand, Wes, are we obsessing about sharing a really successful finished product, as MFG said, or are we being vulnerable about the journey and the why?
Yeah, well, I think the prerequisite to building a really strong brand, personal brand, is actually creating value. So it doesn't matter the occupation, it doesn't matter the genre. I think if a man can commit to his craft, because let's keep the conversation for like craft and career or your business. If the prerequisite is not like I'm just going to be committed to creating the most value that I possibly can, then right, like you should probably get into another line of work, in my view. From there, though, if you actually do that, in my opinion, to take over your local space is pretty straightforward and easy. Like if you can be the guy, what doesn't matter, the electrician, the landscaper, whatever, it doesn't matter, the local deli shop owner, but be the one that creates the most value in that industry in your local community. In my opinion, it's game over. I mean, you'll have so much work, right, that you'll have to hire employees, et cetera, or you'll be the best employee in your company. Because, I mean, the reality is, in my opinion, Warren Buffett spoke the truth when he said most people sleepwalk through life, especially in their career. Most people, and that's okay. Like, this is not a judgment, but that's the reality. Most people are not trying to be a master craftsperson. I mean, Kaizen, would you agree with that? Most people are not really out to like be the number one in their industry or in their local industry. They're just out to make sure they can pay their bills and then go off and do whatever else. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say that's pretty accurate. I was like a majority of the people that you interact with have that somnambulance mentality of just getting from the middle of the day, like they'll wake up, all right, now I just got to get to lunch. Now I just got to get to this part of the day. Now I just got to get to this part. and then they go home, and then they're all right. I'm just gonna watch a couple of Netflix shows or something, and then before they know it, that day's gone. And instead of like actively working to better themselves or improve the situation, or if there's something that they don't like, try to fix, like taking an active participation in their own life instead of just kind of like, well, I hope somebody comes and fixes this shit.
Hey dudes, sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to romasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Yep, completely agree. Ray, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think of like those of us who are in recovery from drugs and alcohol, and the mantra of one day at a time, like that really helps those of us who are experiencing a crisis where, you know, our business is failing, or our health is failing, or our marriage is failing, or things are out of control. That just live one day at a time is a kind of a mantra that encourages us not to do anything reckless, right? And also not to just get frozen because there are so many big things we have to change. So I guess, Kaizen, if I can push back on you a little bit, what's the difference between living one day at a time and the somnambulant life, which is like, because when I say live one day at a time, I think of being present and just like trying to make the most of each day. But the way you phrased it was like just drifting from lunch to dinner to work, back home to sleep. What's the difference between one, like, I guess one's a healthy approach and one's an unhealthy approach to being present, right?
Yeah. So I think that's the whole mindfulness that you would have to apply. So taking reflection throughout the day, that's like where I think the journaling and the scorecard will help. And I think that's something that like I haven't been doing as much, but I've noticed when I do it, it helps reflect a little bit more of like your direction, where you're going, like what am I doing day to day, week to week, whatever, what is going to compound interest in this area? Am I like doing these things and checking this off? Am I building momentum this direction, or am I spiraling in this direction?
Word. Phil, well, what's the difference for you between like drifting from one meal to the next and like blinking and 2 years have gone by, or just like being present in the day and not worrying about like all the things you haven't done or can't do or won't do? Like, do you have anything to add to that, kind of like a healthy way or an unhealthy way to have a mindset like that?
I don't quite understand the question, but I mean, the difference is gigantic. I just can't do it. I haven't practiced meditation enough to be able to maintain any kind of mindfulness.
But you bring Buddhism to the conversation once in a while, don't you?
Yeah, it's because I'm faking that I care about meditation. I haven't actually done it very much at all. I've done it at the meditation retreat, and I've done it maybe a few hundred times over the course of like 5 years, which is not enough at all to, make progress.
Yeah, well, don't worry, dude. I don't know anyone who like doesn't struggle with meditation. Wes, you're our fearless leader. How's your meditation practice these days?
Well, weirdly enough, I did it yesterday, but I've, similar to Phil, like, I've gone on long stretches of doing it daily. Sometimes, actually, long stretches of doing it twice daily. And when I do that, I feel like superhuman. But yeah, I mean, like you say, Ray, it's a practice. I fail more often than I'm successful at it, for sure.
Mm-hmm. How about you, MFG? Where do you like? How do you think about like the unhealthy sleepwalking through life, going from one meal to the next, versus the healthy, just like being present-minded and being mindful?
Gratitude. Gratitude is a really powerful tool to recenter you, because it's hard for gratitude to coexist with anything else. So gratitude and desire have a hard time coexisting. When you're caught up in desire, you're just kind of mindlessly setting these, like Kazan was saying, you just got to get to lunch, just got to get to this. You're kind of just following the breadcrumb path. But when you can find gratitude for whatever it is, you know what I mean, what you're doing at that moment, the desire kind of drops away and you're existing in a place of that you're present. I find gratitude to bring me to the present very quickly. And a lot of times for me, I kind of will get caught up in the go, go, go to distract me, because that was a tool that in the past I would have to distract myself from the reality that was in my present, because I couldn't sit in it. It was too much. So if I kept moving, then I was always kind of distracting myself and kind of just sleepwalking through things. Now it's the inverse. Now it's like when I stop, things are so good and things have come so far that that's hard to internalize now. Now is how good can I stand it? But I was finding myself doing the same sleepwalking process, doing the same, being productive and getting things done, but I wasn't present. You know what I mean? And when you can find the gratitude for where you're at and what you're doing, it kind of snaps you right back out of that sleepwalking stage, out of that just mindless pursuit, right into working with intention, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Awesome. Something else that comes to mind is like, Wes, is the team. Like, how important is it to you and your personal brand, Wes, that you are part of a team or part of teams rather than being isolated?
Well, so I think you really bring up a really good topic today of like personal brand, because I do think it's an under talked about topic, especially if people are working for a company. But I think if you could simplify it down, I think it's Ryan Serhant who talked about, brand is basically reputation. Mm-hmm. So like starting to build that reputation, and you actually don't need any real resources other than the intention. Okay, today I want to rebuild my reputation. I'm going to stop telling lies. I'm going to stop telling little white lies. I'm going to start following through. I'm going to start showing up on time. I'm going to start showing up early. I'm going to start executing. I'm going to start giving more than I promised to build in the additional goodwill. So my vote would be to everybody to hear that. There's not a single person, including myself, on this team that can't use an update and like, okay, how can you polish off or increase your brand right out of the gate today? And then extending it, right to your question, extending it to a team, you basically say, okay, how can I add more people to be included and consistent with my reputation? And that's a whole thing. I mean, whether that be with your family, with your friends, with your peer group, with your employees, or if you're part of a staff, right? Like, how can you positively impact other people so that they now agree with and amplify your values and your reputation? So I hope that answers your question. Kaizen, what's your perspective? Do you agree that, a personal brand is nothing more than a reputation, and a reputation is nothing more than consistent behavior and value delivered to other humans?
I can see the correlation. Like, of what you're putting out is what the perception of you is consistently, then that's what people will view you as. And so that in their head is probably like one of the 150 Dunbar number, this person is this kind of thing, if you're doing it enough. And that's what gets like super buy-in on their part. But I think that's where that can kind of be hard to walk that line of like either putting out too much stuff or not putting out enough to where you're like if you were seeing McDonald's advertisements like all the time, it would probably like drive you crazy, versus if it was just like an occasional kind of thing, it might like entice you to actually stop and get fries. But that's something I think I probably struggle with, as far as like I want to put out my own marketing stuff, but I have this perception that it's going to look unprofessional or unpolished instead of just putting it out. And so I'm not putting out as much stuff out as I could potentially.
Yeah, we struggle
Can
with
I?
that, or we have that conversation all the time, Wes and I, Kaizen. And like, I would just go back to what MFG said. Like, you know, you got to ask yourself: is it more valuable to put out a finished product the way Procter and Gamble would through their billion-dollar marketing machine, or is it just as valuable to be vulnerable about the journey, share the moment you are in your journey, and I'm not sure that would be less valuable or less convincing, right? Wes, we have those conversations, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kaizen, if you don't mind me, do you mind if I comment on what you were saying, bud?
Brother to brother.
So yeah, so I think this is where like the example that you brought up, in my opinion, is like, yeah, McDonald's would be more asking than they would be giving. And this is where I wonder if ego gets in the way. It's like, if the nucleus of what you're doing, if it's actually intentionally created to create value, then my guess would be that people don't care how much you put up. Like if everything you posted to me was valuable and did not feel like you're trying to get from me, and I know you have enough judgment to differentiate between the two. I wonder, if you don't mind me saying, if it's more fear-based, because I would never put you in the bucket of like, oh, Kaizen's just going to spam me. I would actually say the opposite. Kaizen, anything he's going to do is going to be with the intentionality of actually giving me some sort of benefit. And I don't know that, honestly, that there's an upper limit to that.
I think the fear of it on my part is like reflecting back on it and however long, and then being like the self cringe probably more than the actual perception of what anybody else would think.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I mean, and in my opinion, that's the curse. It's also its greatest gift, because that is such a moat around this stuff that 99% of people don't want to do it. So I wonder, as like the whole Ryan Holiday thing, I mean, if that obstacle is the way, like because of that obstacle, that's what makes it so valuable. And MFG, I would love to get your perspective on that. I mean, it's like number one, how many paintings or sculptures or art pieces can be created before the world says, yep, no, we're done, we're satisfied, we don't want any art? And then number two, it's like, is there actual benefit that there's so much fear based around it, because that keeps the majority of the competition out?
I don't know. I just want to know how many sculptures I got to make before fucking Ray will represent me.
How did I know this one?
How many naked women do you have?
How did I know
that are painted MFG?
Mike,
I
think if you make a big pink
Ray,
teddy bear,
you know what I mean?
Mike, I think if you made a big pink teddy bear, Ray would get really excited to sell it for $80,000.
You see this, Ray?
50. It was 50.
I'm making a dopamine molecule as a piece of wall art. Is that fucking out in left field enough for you? Can you sell a dopamine molecule?
We're getting warm. That's pretty fun.
You see, Mike,
I don't know.
a big pink teddy bear is much more culturally relevant.
Maybe I can drudge up some oppression that is upon me to make my art more valuable. But no, I think there's really, I think there's no upper limit to how much you should put out. If anything, I hesitate to put stuff out. But then when I just, again, in the same light, just err more on the side of being vulnerable and put out your mistakes and put out the things that you're playing with and that you're trying to do and what you're accomplishing. It again, because like you see it all the time, but sometimes you'll see somebody's stuff on Instagram, I will at least, scrolling through reels, and I'll be like, holy shit, this is fucking unbelievable. And then you look at their page and they have like 2,500 followers. You know what I mean? So, but when I scroll by that, my thought isn't like, oh, this person's just like me. They're on the same, you know what I mean? They're figuring it out. I can almost discount it like, oh, that's just another person that's probably got a fucking fully built shop and a budget and gets to just, throw money around. So I think in the same way, you know what I mean? When you're going to put more stuff out, do less of trying to make it look cool and do more to highlight the growth and the progression, you know what I mean, and your process, you know what I mean, that brings it back to that relatable space where it curates your brand. And now you have people that are not just love what you're producing, whatever that might be, a product, a service, but they're vested in you and your story along the way. So you know, there's a lot more value to give to people that way, and there's a lot more traction to gain as far as from a sales standpoint.
Yeah, and I think relatable is absolutely the key word there, and likable is interchangeable with it, right? In terms of like, I don't think people are looking for the best of the best and like an untouchable kind of like supremacy in an industry. It's
now
like,
Wes will know this, but all things being equal, people want to do business with people that they like and they trust, and people tend to like and trust people that they think are just like them. So when you can portray yourself along the guidelines of reasonable universal appeal to whatever it is, and highlight what makes you just like the person who, by the way, might not be like you at all in regards to what they're pursuing, but you create that bridge of relatability, and all of a sudden now they want you to do well. They want to buy something from you. They trust you because oh, this guy's just like me. You know, so it's kind of a more strategic overall approach through vulnerability and honesty that will gain you more, you know, actual, you know, raving fans.
and what do you think, Kaizen, about like the relatability is key mantra?
I literally saw somebody say something along the lines of that on a comment today when they were talking about Shane's monologue on Saturday Night Live, how he was honest and open about it, and it showed vulnerability and like anxiety about it. And a lot of people really appreciated and liked it because it showed he's just a regular dude. And I think just that vulnerability of being able to show that is super powerful in that way.
Humility like comes to mind as well, right?
Yeah.
I do think there's something to be said for, you know, maybe the two running simultaneously, right? Like open and vulnerable, assuming you're on the path of progress. You know, so it's like assuming assuming you're intentionally trying to add value. Because if somebody's just being open and vulnerable, but they're not doing anything, right? Like it's like which a lot of people are, right? So I think a certain level like of, hey, I'm probably, let me say this, being vulnerable in the sense of like, hey, I'm not pretending to be some master guru here, but I've probably dedicated a bit more time than you have. I've done more research, so I can give you the next few feet of your journey because I've already been through that journey, right? So I'm not claiming to know how to go completely through it, but I am claiming to know at least to help you to be able to get through the next few feet. As in, does that resonate at all?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, I don't know, like, yeah, I think it's just honest. I don't know. It always just seems like being realistic and being honest with yourself is somehow is something that most people aren't able to do. Like, you know, like the other side of it is like a lot of people, you know, like we've been saying now, like are afraid to put themselves out there. But then I always see there's a couple of people I follow online who are like, you know, whatever, acquaintances of mine and stuff online. They'll put stuff out over and over and over and over, and then it'll get no results. And I'm like, dude, like obviously what you're putting out is not interesting to people. You get like 1 or 2 likes or 0 likes, and you'll put the same type of thing out every day for months. And I'm like, what? Are you not self-reflective? Why are you still doing this? I don't understand. Like, it's very confusing to me how people get in that situation, you know? And it's like I don't know, I think a lot of people just aren't, for some reason, are just afraid or whatever, just aren't able to be honest with themselves. Like, people always say that, there's like an enormous amount of video games that are sold every day. Like every single day now these days, like a few hundred games come out, or like it's like an insane number. And people are always like, "Oh yeah, my game like didn't sell at all because it got buried." And I'm like, I don't think that happens. Like if you look through, like I just looked through that there was this event recently that where people put their free demo online. And so I looked through literally thousands of demos. I spent a few hours looking through thousands of game demos, and I'm like, I found 10, maybe. I found 10 unique looking games. And they're not even that unique. They're like sort of unique and good looking. It's like thousands of people are just making garbage. And it's like, no shit, your game is not going to sell. It can't just be like 5% better. It needs to be like 30% better than other games. It needs to be like way better, you know? And it's like, I don't know. It just seems like honesty and self-reflection. Like I don't know. I just feel like honesty and self-reflection is important. I don't know what my point is, but
that makes sense tying into like what Wes is saying, where you're balancing the honesty and vulnerability aspect, but still taking action. Like you can still put out and make progress forward as you're showing that vulnerability side of yourself, but you still have to be doing the work to get to a point where that matters. Like if you're honest and open, but you're not like doing anything about it, then it's like, okay, what is that providing to anybody? Versus if you're doing like steps along the way, making progress while showing that vulnerability, that's where you're going to get the most like ripples as far as like the ripple effect, or like, I don't know, interactions that you're doing that are positive and kind of like compounding. That I was kind of wanting to tie this. There's a concept, like the whole thing that made me think of this thing of like for your brand doing what this dude told me was value arbitrage. So he would like connect a bunch of other people in ways that he would get the benefits from, like trying to find ways to connect other people and the most beneficial ways to them and their brand, like connecting photographers to models and different things like that, or like venues to people that were running events, and not asking for anything in return, but helping build these networks and relationships in a way that they were more than willing to help his brand, his self brand, whatever, to use like their venues for his commercials or filming, their cameras like for his types of photo shoots, and just using that like concept of connecting people. That I've noticed it in myself. There was a person that I did some work with, and I promoted him to some other people that were like in his line of work, and in return I got a client from him that I'm doing work at like this week. I went last night to this renovation house that this guy is running, and this is all from just word of mouth from a couple people that I've just been kind of working in conjunction with as far as like promoting their little side business or whatever that they're doing. But I think that concept, that providing value by just introducing, connecting other people, making more connections, is something that I think is really deep and can be applied in whatever.
I think that's creating value again. Yeah, like where it comes back to creating value is the road to being successful, right? Where it seems at the time that you're just connecting people, you're just being a connector, but what you're actually doing is creating value and creating a reputation for like helping people build teams to succeed. And that's an extremely valuable attribute, and I think links you in their mind with success, right? Wes, with this personal brand video that Alex Hormozi put out, the one thing that connects The Rock, Joe Rogan, Taylor Swift, everyone else he kind of profiled is longevity, right? And Wes, what does longevity mean to you?
I mean, just volume over time. Like that's the way that I read that. And to Phil's point, and I'm sorry, guys, I might start going in and out of service here. But to Phil's point, completely agree, right? Like, I think one of the components of value creation is you have to decide who you want to serve and give value to. So I think being just as committed, if not more than committed to the actual audience is really important, because then, yes, Phil, what you're saying, in my opinion, is absolutely correct, right? Like, if the market's telling you they don't want a certain thing and telling you by not saying anything, by just receiving crickets on the other side, then it's like, okay, like that.
Oh man, this is your fault. This is your fault, right?
So,
Why did you do
I think that's very important. And then in terms of longevity, oh yeah, right.
You're cutting out, Wes.
West is getting choppy. Phil, do you want to reiterate what you said before? Because I think that's an extremely important point. Decide who you want to serve and direct your energy there.
I'm honestly not sure which thing I said that Wes was referring to.
Neither do I. I'm not sure either. But that was wisdom.
I think I said something good at one point. Was it the part about Red Bull at the beginning? No, it was. No, he's talking about the thing I was just saying. Well, I don't know if I have much more to say about it, really. I don't know. I think. Well, I don't know. This is only tangentially related, but like, I find it very difficult. I find it extremely frustrating, and I think it's kind of really disgusting in a way that society now has numbers attached to our follower count that anyone can look up. I think that's disgusting and terrible for culture. But that you can look at someone and be like even every tweet is like, oh, this has 100,000 likes, and then you try to figure out like, why is it funny? It's like the reverse of how life should go. But so I really like struggle with that, and I really struggle with like when I tweet something, if I say something that I think is funny or interesting, or if I post something I'm working on and it gets no likes, that does. I've talked to Mike about this before offline. Like, I think especially for art, or really for anything that you care about, but for me, for art, I really, really hate that I have a number that I can see, like telling me, like, sure, in a way, it's like, if people really like it, that's great. But when people don't like it, I don't want that to affect me. Like, I like it, and that's why I did it. And it really sucks to me that, like, I know that's affecting everyone. It's affecting me for sure. Even if I pretend even if I try to be like, no, I'm not going to care, like, it's definitely affecting me. It's a number that says like, only 8 people like this or whatever. It's like, I don't want that to affect me to the degree that like I start like chasing a number, because it's stupid. And that's the way everyone becomes like a fake influencer guy.
That's very useful. That's very useful. Kaizen, what do you think of like, how do you thread the needle? How do you kind of like balance between figuring out what the market wants on the one hand, but then what Phil said is like assigning yourself a worth based on how many followers you have, what your GPA is on your transcript from school, like whether you get the job or not. Do you know what I mean? Like,
walking that line of self-reflection of if you are in fact bussin' or you cap. Are you goated with the sauce or not? Like,
exactly.
I think it's just like looking at yourself and saying, am I living in alignment with my core values? What I think is all of that, like, in alignment. Am I acting in alignment of that? Because if not, that's where the vehicle that is my body, my life, or whatever is going to feel off. Like when you're driving, if your car alignment's off, then it's going to like rattle. You're going to feel fucked up when you're driving. So if one of your life components is off and you're not addressing it, it's like walking or driving with like a busted tire. So if like you're putting out stuff and you're not doing it to like what you know is like your best, or I don't know. I think it's like something
that's outstanding.
I'm not an expert on, but I can kind of understand what you're referencing.
No, that's outstanding. So, and Wes,
I mean,
let's test your signal, Wes. Like, how do you balance like what the market wants and like the value you want to create, because there's sometimes some dissonance there, is there not?
Yeah. Am I coming through okay now?
Yes.
Can you hear me or no?
Yes.
Frequently testing.
Frequently testing the market.
How do you? So you are breaking. Do that, Wes. How do you do that? I mean, maybe it's a hard, complicated answer for you, but I don't know.
Yeah. What does the testing the market mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, literally down to the point of like every single time I get, like, I'm going into a presentation literally in 2 minutes, right? Like, I'm about to have, I think it's 15 meetings today. So it's like not only testing in those 15 meetings, but then testing every time I talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
sorry guys, yeah, my audio, count me out.
All right.
Hey,
that was good. That was good. We can munch on that. Kaizen, like, what comes to mind for you when Wes says, well, like market testing?
There was someone that I knew that did a lot of freelance work, and he was like promoting other people to do freelance work, and they were doing Facebook ads, and they would look at the data after their ads and do analysis on it and like follow-up analysis. So I think that's kind of like maybe not like that exact thing, but that formula of whatever you're putting out, looking at the data for it and then kind of like reflecting on it and seeing, okay, what is this telling me? And then kind of like choosing what direction that you're going from there. So like taking in the information that you're getting from whatever it is that you put out. What do people like about it? What do they not like? What campaigns have I run that got me the most ROI that I could do again, maybe tweak this or that and get more out of, or just taking whatever it is that you're putting out under a microscope and looking at it, paying a little bit more attention to it than just kind of like putting it out and just, all right, well, I did that and I'm not going to utilize it fully. Like the whole Native American use every part of the buffalo. So you're using every part of whatever it is that you're putting out, even and particularly, especially the butthole.
Thank you for that. Phil, what are some of the feedback mechanisms that you have as a game creator that you can like? Well,
I was going to say this earlier. Like, I think we're all kind of deluding ourselves by caring about social media. It's. I don't want to just say the same thing I said before, but like the thing is, like, social media is a place where people go to turn their brain off, and so when they respond to you on social media, that's who's responding to you, is someone who's not thinking, someone who spent 5 seconds looking at what you did, and they're like, well, this is my reaction. And I'm self-absorbed enough to even think that you care about my reaction to post this stupid bullshit. So that's the person who's responding to you most of the time. It's not like a thoughtful thing. So it's really stupid to take that seriously. And I don't think ignoring it is the right answer, but I think ignoring most of it is the right answer. I don't know. I think I just try to take feedback from not social media, from like people that actually have played my game and I value their opinions. You know, like, I don't know if this is useful information to other people, but there's this thing basically that's, I think, so there's this thing in game design where people will give you advice all the time. People who play your game will be like, hey, there's this problem I ran into, you should do this. And so if people will say like, hey, I died in level 5, you should make the rocket launcher do more damage. Just a random example. Like the thing that's good to actually do is to completely ignore their suggestions, but listen to their problem, right? If someone plays your game and they struggle with something, they really struggled with it. They're not making that part up. They struggled with that part of the game. They found it difficult or whatever, but the solution is not to just listen to them and do what they're saying, because they're not the game designer. They're not the one making the game. Most people playing a game have zero understanding of how the actual game works and why the game works the way it does. So when they say like, hey, what if you just cut that part of the sentence off? Don't just ignore that part, because they don't know what they're talking about. but their problem is real. So you can listen to that part, and it's important to listen to that part because that was a real thing that happened. But maybe it's up to you to understand what your game is and to understand what. I hope everyone can analogize this to their life, but for not games. But like, if you know what your game is, and they say, "Hey, I really struggled on level 5," and you're like, "Good, level 5 is supposed to be really hard," then there's no problem, and you're good, right?
So actually, like interpreting that data in a way that it makes sense to you, as far as like what that actually means. It might not, like on the surface, sound like they might say they're having problem in level 5 or whatever, but that might actually mean behind the scenes what you have to do in order to use that information in a way that's useful. Might need something different. So like translating what you're getting in a way that it actually makes sense, or like cleaning the data and like data analysis, word vocabulary, whatever the hell you call it.
Yeah, I would just say listen to their problem and not their suggestions, because their suggestions are almost worthless because they don't know what they don't know how to solve those problems.
They don't know who it is.
I like that, dude. It's like the problem is real, or as Kaizen said, the data is real, but the recommendation is optional. Right?
Yeah, and I think you could probably apply that. You could probably apply that to any situation where you're creating something and showing someone.
Yeah,
they don't
exactly.
know what they don't know almost anything about what's going on with the actual thing.
Yeah,
because they're just an observer.
But the data or the data point is real, and I think like you could even apply that to anything your wife says. Right? Is that the data point is real? The recommendation is optional.
That's actually an interesting example, because I was about to say the thing is, okay, this is like one of the main reasons why games can get really shitty, can suck these days, is because when games are made in a corporate setting, which almost all games are made by hundreds and hundreds of people, that becomes a situation where when people play test the game, they give feedback. They're like, "Hey, I died in this part and it was really frustrating and I hated it." And then the bosses are like, "Okay, remove that part. You guys have to just remove that part," right? So it becomes this rounded off bullshit, homogenized flop of a game. And that's the same reason, everyone hates sitcoms these days, because they're the same thing. TV is the same way. It's all just like this rounded off nonsense. And this is the thing, is like, things can have tension. Even relationships can have tension. Tension is good. It's literally good. Tension is good for certain things.
The best art has tension, and that's true of music, paintings, movies, or even menus, and especially like video games.
I think the thing is, when something has tension, certain people won't tolerate it and they'll give up. And so people who are just focused on making money will see that as, "Oh, we lost a customer," or "That customer bought our thing, is unsatisfied." That's very bad. But that's just the way of the world. That some people will not like the thing that you're making and they'll give up. That doesn't mean that there's necessarily a problem there. It's like if someone from Japan came and drove an American car and they're like, "It's left-hand drive. This is bullshit." It's like, you don't change the car. That's their fault for thinking that an American car is right-hand drive, right?
This is bullshit. But I love that. Tension is almost the difference between commerce and art, right? Is where in art you want to leave that tension in, and in commerce, or maybe there's a better word for it, you want to take out all those pain points, right?
Make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. I think that tension is necessary in all aspects of life, and I think the good things in life have something. I don't think there's I think it's probably, I don't know. I would be curious to know what Wes thinks about this. I don't think this idea of zero friction anywhere ever, I'm just some magical speeding bullet of of a customer. I don't think that's a real thing that's even achievable or desirable. But I don't know. I don't know that much about business, but I don't think that that's real. There's certain areas where tension is just a thing, and removing it means you're just making your thing suck.
Well, Kaizen, in business and as an entrepreneur, right? You and I would think that friction would be points for a potential customer to exit the conversation, right? And so when we talk about friction, that's what we're referring to. But then again, like the vulnerability that MFG was talking about, that could be like we might consider, with like the naive person might consider that friction, right? As like, this is something they're not going to like, this is something they're not going to be impressed by, and they're just going to exit. What do you think? What do you think about, like, friction isn't always bad? Friction isn't even always undesirable.
Probably just be more dependent on like what your definition or like usage of it is. So like the word friction in English versus the word friction in Spanish isn't going to mean the same way. They're used differently, right? So if friction is like you doing the painful work and reflection to make improvements, that might be called that. It's just whatever it is that you're using to call it in your head or whatever. Or maybe it might be you're feeling resistance in this direction, or I think it's just what words and what meaning you're using that you're giving to it that is a reflection of. Because like in business, the easier it is that you make it, like people have a problem, you fix that problem with a solution and you make it as easy as possible. Just that's why like Amazon is number one. Like they make it to where you push a button and the shit's at your door. So the easier it is for a customer to give you their money, the more repeatable that it's going to be. But in a way that grosses people out, then maybe not. So finding that kind of balance.
What if the friction is I don't have $12 to buy this thing on Amazon, right? Like that's the thing is like, for like things like therapy. It seems like therapy, the way they reduce the friction is by reducing any real utility of any kind, right? Therapy is like you just go and talk to your pretend girlfriend and pay her $200, and like nothing ever happens because you're not actually doing the hard part. The hard part is actually changing the things you go and complain about every week, and that's really hard. That's the friction part, right? Like,
yeah, and that's what Kaizen just said. And he was not referring to partner intimacy, but he like growth and improvement requires friction or resistance, right? And like, and then I was even going to push back on you, like, or pull the thread a little more, Kaizen, because like,
throw it back.
The kind of sales training that I've had, like, you don't race to the sale, right? Like you kind of like stop them, slow them down, make sure they know exactly what they're getting into, and get them to agree to all this stuff along the way, right? Which involves a certain amount of resistance, right? Rather than just like promising them whatever they want till they say yes and make a deposit, right? So like, and I'm going to regret saying this, but doing it right involves like doing it slowly and a certain amount of resistance. Mm-hmm. Does it not?
I can see what you mean there. Like, and I think like Grant Cardone and a couple of other like business guys would call those like in your sales script or your sales presentation, your things along the way that it makes the people not want a refund at the end of it. It's getting them to buy in, the tie downs, they're confirming, yes, they are interested. Yes, they do want to buy this. Yes, this does make sense. It makes sense for them to buy it because of this. They want to buy it because of this. And you make them say that, so they agree to it. So it's like, it's like Inception, where you're putting that idea in their head to where they think it's their idea. But those are all in place for reasons. Like, it's all a compliance ladder to get them to the end where they agree, this is the situation, this is what transaction occurred, I bought this, and this was the reason. As the salesperson, you're giving them the best potential reasons for them to buy. Obviously, you're not. That's something that you also have to kind of take into account when you're going into places or other interactions, that this may be a person selling something. Are they putting me in some sort of compliance ladder to where they're at the end, there's somebody with a butcher knife ready to cut me over the head with it, but it's financial. You know what I mean? So setting up that like path, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation, where like we started talking about personal brand, and then the need to be honest and to be vulnerable about where you are on the journey, being relatable. And then I think we got to a really good conversation about like sometimes the most frictionless interaction isn't the most authentic one, and that if you want a good finish, it's going to require a little bit of friction. Those are my final thoughts. Kaizen, keep it classy. Final thoughts.
Tying into what you just said, you have to edge when you goon, right? So if you're going to bust,
Absolutely.
you have to edge first. So that's
Absolutely.
the whole mentality. But using that analogy, not on the surface, you look at the deeper level meaning under it. You're putting in the work to get that actual outcome. So you're putting in the work to get the delayed gratification, not the instant gratification.
Exactly, dude. And Jedi mind trick par excellence right there. Phil, any closing thoughts from you, please, sir?
Let's see. My closing thoughts are: if Ray was a good person, he would sell Mike's art for $100,000 each, and and give him 99% of the profit.
Well, I'm not a good person by that definition.
Damn, that sucks, dude.
MFG, closing thoughts.
Okay, so it requires friction, right? So if you guys just saw what I was doing, I took this piece of just regular round stock and prepping it and sanding it. You get that totally flat, totally perfect finish. But that requires,
it takes a couple of sparks.
it takes friction, it takes heat, it takes sparks, it's uncomfortable, it's loud, it's noisy, but the end result is what you get from it. It's my final thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for an outstanding conversation. We'll see you on Friday.